Okay, actually, could you state your name, your profession, and your opinion of what I'm about to show the people?
Sure, my name is Chris Walling. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I'm an academic healthcare executive. So primarily, what I'm observing here is that, especially at the top of the skull, that hole, would appear to be consistent with some of the other skulls who have trauma, whereupon in ancient times, the primary mechanism of surgery was to remove illness or spirit by really essentially creating a hole in the skull. This was a common medicinal practice that you saw throughout ancient Incan cultures and a lot of indigenous cultures. It was believed to be that would relieve the negative spirit and allow the person to heal. And that would be consistent with what I'm seeing here. This doesn't appear to be congenital or anything that is necessarily from birth, but rather happened much later on after the development of the form. But you have an extraordinary increase in the size, particularly of where you would see executive function in the brain, because that's where the largest part has sort of come out in 180 degrees on both sides, which would appear to not be necessarily from adulteration, but much more from evolution.
Yeah.
However, the cracks in the skull, and maybe it's because the museum has done that, there appears to be some form of adhesion that's been put there to try to keep it together. That's not part of the artifact itself.
Right, yeah. Senior Renato did that in order to keep the skull together.
Right.
So do you think you're looking at an example of cranial deformation, or possibly that this person was could have been born this way?
This is born this way.
Born this way.
Oh, yeah.
And the dentition, the teeth?
Now that's kind of odd, because even the mismatch of the coloration has got me kind of concerned that it's inconsistent, because typically, even with decalcification of most artifact that you find in teeth, particularly considering they didn't have good dental care, even at that time, you're not going to see that level of white compared to the rest of the skull. You would see a consistency between the coloration.
And how old would you estimate this person would have been at the time of death?
Well, that's difficult to say, because it's completely inconsistent with any typical, fetal evolution. So I can't even guess.
Do you see a difference in the size or the presumed age of the skull as compared to the development of the teeth?
Yes. Now that would indicate that you're looking at least anywhere from 8 to 10 years of age. But even the molars are so huge that it could be even late teens, early adult. It's a mismatch for me.
And that's not consistent with the size of the body?
No, it's not.
Does it have the normal number of ribs and
The
things like
intercostals appear to also have experienced some form of trauma or have been severed at some point. Particularly in the upper rib cage, the first, second, and third ribs appear to be severed from some device, because you'll see the exposed bone has been cut, whereas the lower ribs are completely intact.
What about number?
Yeah, how about
the number
ribs?
you've got, from what I can see,
You can see in the mirror.
you've got a floating rib down here, which we all still have today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Which is inconsistent
Which is
with?
inconsistent with most Homo sapiens.
What do most people have?
Well, it depends. Some people have an extra rib. It just depends on the individual. Typically, you're looking at anywhere from 6. Sometimes people will have as most as 7, but never at this size in terms of development.
So we got more ribs going.
You've got
then.
more ribs going than you would normally have for that form.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking at in the mirror at the back, and it just seemed
Oh,
like...
I didn't even catch the mirror.
Yeah, so no, if you catch the mirror,
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
really
yeah.
see them coming.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, almost 10. You've got 10. That's really weird.
Really?
That's really weird.
I'm looking and thinking, I don't know a
It's
lot about
completely
anatomy.
genetically inconsistent.
I don't know a lot about anatomy, but it looked weird.
Yeah.
So thank you for backing
Yeah,
that up.
it is. It's
Thank you.
completely weird. And, function follows form, right? All throughout nature, meaning
Sure.
nature doesn't grow an arm unless the arm's going to be used, and nature isn't going to develop an intercostal unless there's something to protect. So it's really strange.
So in terms of the skull and the drawing, do you see any possible relationship, or is that too simplistic?
It's a big of a leap because if you were to place tissue in and around the nose, it's going to come a lot higher, and I would imagine that there's going to be cartilage that's formed on this one just because of the place of where the jaw line is coming in. So there's absolutely no cartilage on this artistic representation on the right. It seems to be simply just like a Chinese pug, like a dog, with no cartilage formation of the nose at all, whereas this skull is going to have some cartilage. There's no reason for there to be bone protruding that far out without there being some sort of superficial nose that comes out a little bit further.
Oh, okay.
Also, I'm looking at the drawing, and it doesn't seem to accommodate for the teeth.
No.
It's kind of pretending the teeth aren't there
Right.
too.
This guy's gumming it on the right.
Yeah, and this guy isn't.
And this guy isn't.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
So we are, in your opinion, though, we're definitely not looking at a Homo sapien.
You're not. No. If you are, you're looking at one that has severe genetic malformations. In other words, that the genes are not assimilating in a typical mutation.
Plus, they're out under a microscope even.
And they found this near here, hey, Ryan?
Yeah, he found it on top of the mountain in a graveyard, on the side of a recently excavated grave or plundered tomb.
Was it wrapped in some material?
No, it was just kind of left like that.
But do you see what I mean by the joint articulation here?
Yeah, it's very weird.
It doesn't follow any sort of consistency unless it's a quadrupedal organism.
You're talking about the arm?
Yeah. So a quadrupedal organism is going to need far more joint articulation lower on, what would be the tibular intersection. So here,
Yeah.
in order to have spring,
Yeah.
to be able to run,
Yeah.
on all fours.
But
But
it's still not looking like anything we know on the planet.
well, it could. I mean,
Yeah.
this could be, a weird dog corpse with a skull placed on top of it.
Dogs have that many ribs?
Usually, some breeds can. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's actually taken it out before, and I photographed it. I can send you the photos.
And it's connected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the spinal column goes straight up.
Straight
and
up.
through.
Wow.
And it's not, there was no sign of it being glued on or shoved on or anything like that. But unfortunately, the hands and feet and
It still doesn't
It's missing.
explain why we don't have a vertebral column back
Right.
there,
Right.
does it?
No, it doesn't.
Welcome to the Paracas History Museum here in Paracas, Peru, just south of Lima. Today I'm going to show you the difference between the Paracas ancient people and other people who have lived in this area. Now this person is an example of Inca. Not Inca as in royal Inca, but Inca as in the time period of the Inca. This is a normal shaped skull, and this person's cranial volume was 1,200 cubic centimeters, which is an average human. Now this is an example of cranial deformation. The volume of this skull is 1,100 cubic centimeters. So again, basically normal. And you can tell, obviously, the deformation by the way it was flattened this way. String was wrapped around this way, possibly a board or some kind of material this way when it was a child, and the flattening was done in order to create this shape, which was desirable by these people. Now, another clue here is you see 3 cranial plates, which is normal. Your skull has that. The frontal, and then the 2 parietal plates. Now, the Inca one has that as well. It's a normal feature in a human being. And then we come to the Paracas. And this skull is very different from the other two I've shown you in many different ways. One thing is, in terms of plates, there are only two. There's one frontal and there's one parietal. There are not two parietals, only one. The volume of this skull is 1,500 cubic centimeters, so 25% larger than the Inca skull, shown as the example of what normality is. Also, the eye sockets are much larger. The nose seems to be larger. It has these two holes in the back, which are indicative of where nerves would come out of the skull to feed this part of the head. That is not a normal feature in a human being, in a normal human being. Now, the shape clearly could have been achieved via deformation in order, because we can see this obvious transformation here. However, it's the volume and the fact that there are hundreds of examples of this. There are actually 5 different kinds, 5 different styles of elongated skulls here in the Paracas History Museum. That could represent 5 different social classes. We don't really know. No one studied this since 1928. But what I really want to do, because there are so many people interested in these skulls, is to slowly rotate it for you so that you can stop and freeze frame it if you want at any given time to have a look. The jaw is also much larger than a normal human being, and there seems to be a genetic tendency to have fewer teeth, especially molars. In some cases, there are at least 4 molars missing, other cases 8. And some people have said that that would be the result of a poor diet, which isn't true because the Paracas area was incredibly productive in terms of producing food, both seafood and also land-based agricultural products. And then this, we see, is an example of where trepanation occurred, brain surgery. Again, something seemingly pioneered by the Paracas and later adopted by people such as the Inca and the Nazca. So this is just a brief introduction to what I wish to show you here at the Paracas History Museum, and feel free to come at any time and explore this phenomenon with us. Thank you. So outside of Cusco and above the Sacred Valley is this astonishing Inca accomplishment called Marae. And the conventional story behind it is that it is an agricultural experimental station. But a German study 2 years ago proved pretty conclusively that each level is not that different in terms of temperature and humidity than the other levels. So the Inca may have used it as an experimental station or as a place to grow food. But what's more intriguing are the acoustic properties. There was someone down in the center not talking that loud. We could hear them way up here. So the question is this actually something far more profound than an auditorium or an experimental station for food? Is it possible that this is the remnant of an ancient energy generator of some kind? Well, as an auditorium, it doesn't make sense because you would have staircases to move people, not steps like that. The Inca were masters at building stairways, so that doesn't work. And again, it's the acoustics. We can hear the people who are up there.
Yes, you can also hear them.
Yeah.
The birds.
Oh, yeah, you can hear the birds all around you.
And these are, so the sound becomes more clear. These are not fast. They are.
Well, the thing is, if they built normal staircases going vertically that way, then that might inhibit the sound, the movement of the sound inside of it. So maybe that's part of the reason for the spacing of them, is that air has to go through. Another odd thing is that the sound coming from people up over the edge of this is louder than these three guys who are standing right there. And that's what we find here, is we find sonic dead pockets where you could be standing right next to somebody, or somebody's in front of you and they're talking. All of a sudden their voice goes loud, and then it goes is diminished, and then loud and diminished. Almost as like there are waves of sound going through this thing. So again, that's the case here. Well, I can hear my own echo in here, but these guys who are here, I can barely hear them. But somebody who's up at the top here, over there, their voice is louder than it is there. Even if you stamp your foot here, it echoes. And if you call out, the effect is it's obvious. So, were the Inca experimenting with sound in order to assist in the growth of plants? And was this an amphitheater? Or is it even older than that? All these walls are clearly Inca period, but the shape itself, was that designed and built by an older culture that used this for some kind of energy transmission? The area is completely embedded with quartz crystal. Quartz crystal is known for its piezoelectric property. And an engineer who I brought here just a few days ago is going to hire someone to do a study to see if it's plausible that this shape is in fact some kind of subtle energy or sonic energy generating system. You can never visit ancient Inca sites too many times, because every time you go, you always find something that you haven't seen before. That's how complex a lot of the ancient archaeological sites in Cusco are. Presently, we're at Chinchero. And Chinchero is not one of the more popular tourist destinations, but it's incredibly fascinating, because here we find not only the wall that you just saw, but examples like this. These very strange cutout surfaces in the bedrock. This is most likely a hard limestone. And this is what Jesus Gamarra of Cusco and his father Alfredo before him would call Hananpacha, which is the first world, or the first period of creativity, supposedly by humans, in the area of Cusco and the Sacred Valley. And now descending quite a massive Inca period staircase and across the terraces, which again are of the Inca period. Now the thing is that what most tour guides and books won't tell you is the fact that, of course, the Inca were here, were profound constructors of terracing systems, housing, palaces, roadways, etc. But what most don't take into account is the fact that before the Inca, there were most likely two very highly advanced civilizations, technically superior to the Inca, and in some ways technically superior to us, as hard as that may be to imagine. The Inca toolkit, as it were, consisted of bronze chisels, copper chisels, and stone hammers. And with that, they were able to create immense terracing systems, very sophisticated roadways. But what they were not capable of creating, and the same is seen in Egypt as well, is structures and carved stone outcrops that could not have been achieved with such simple tools. So terraces, of course, such as those you see behind me, it's quite clear how they were made, why they were made. They were made for agriculture. Houses comprised of many stones are houses. But how do you possibly explain that? Here we have a stone outcrop, and all of these facets and planes are carved into it. Now, this would unlikely be a quarry because so little stone relatively is removed. But the question is, if it wasn't a quarry, what possibly could have been the function? And here again, we see this shaped wall. Some might call these stairs, some might call them seats, but the amount of effort involved to remove the material is very puzzling. Also, the weathering on the stone, it's hard limestone, so it's not as hard as granite, but still, the weathering would indicate not tens or hundreds of years of wear from rain and wind and sun, but probably thousands. And that would put these back long before the existence of the Inca, who appeared in Cusco in the Sacred Valley, by most accounts, about 800 years ago. And again, according to Jesus Gamarra, whose website is theorigintour.com, there are not 5, 10, or 100 carved outcrops like this in the area of Cusco in the Sacred Valley. But he says 5,000. That is curious. Now this is quite a odd feature. A triangular cut in this massive limestone boulder. And then even more odd or curious is this carved out area. Mining, doubtful. Quarrying, doubtful. Strange other cuts here. And proceeding up the stairway, again, another big cut. And if life couldn't get stranger, it just did. In this lower section, which is a potato field, we find these cutout shapes. and two quite massive stones, for some reason, put together. So let's look on the other side. Very odd and very bewildering. The question being, when was this done and by whom? The Gamaras would probably either call this Hananpacha, the oldest culture, or Uranpacha, which is the culture that came after that. And after that were the Inca. Examples of this is a small specimen in comparison to others where you have very tight-fitting joinery like that. Sacsayhuaman above Cusco is the classic place. So if your explanation is that with enough time and with enough manpower they could have achieved all of this, I think you're deluding yourself. And a more ridiculous explanation would be, well, these people had a lot of time on their hands, which is completely untrue. These people had to grow and harvest their own food. They didn't take their bank card and go down to Walmart. Not to put anyone down, it's just the profound nature of what is in Cusco and Peru bewilders engineers, architects, geologists, historians, and many other people. If you'd like to join me at some point, www.hiddenicatours.com.